Stop! That's my
okay.
son! Don't touch
You're
him!
safe now.
The shout
Everything
tore
is
through the
going to
winter
be
air
all
like
right.
something metal striking stone, sharp enough to snap the night in half. And in the instant that followed, when the trembling child buried his face against the man's coat, the billionaire finally felt what her panic had done. She had attacked the one person who had kept her son safe. Seattle in December was a world painted in cold light and long breaths. Even without snow, the air carried a crystalline edge that threaded through the streets, tugged at scarves, and kissed windows with ghostly frost. The city breathed differently in winter, slow, deliberate, almost tender. But nothing glowed the way Seattle Winter Festival did. Thousands had gathered for the opening night. Strings of LED lights twisted through the park like rivers of color. Music drifted between hot chocolate stands. Artificial auroras pulsed across the surface of Lake Union. People came for the spectacle. Children came for the magic. And Ethan Miller came for his son. He walked with one hand tucked into his frayed jacket pocket and the other gripping the mittened hand of 6-year-old Noah, a little boy with a constellation of freckles and a smile far too bright for the year he had endured. "Bah, look!" Noah tugged, pointing at the glowing archway. "The maze! The lights look like stars!" Ethan smiled, though something inside him folded gently inward. "Slow down, buddy. We'll get there." Noah didn't know how his voice cracked. Didn't know this was their first Christmas without the woman who had once braided ribbons into his hair and whispered stories about reindeer. Ethan squeezed Noah's hand. He had promised himself, quietly, fiercely, that his son would not lose Christmas too. When they reached the front of the line, a volunteer handed Noah a brightly colored map labeled the Light Quest Adventure. The boy gasped like he'd been given treasure. "Can I go, Ba? Please?" "Go," Ethan nodded. "I'll wait right here. Stay on the path where I can see you." Noah darted into the maze, swallowed by corridors of shimmering blues and violets. Ethan lifted his chin, tracking the small bobbing shape of Noah's hat, green with a pom-pom, impossible to miss. He stayed that way for minutes, rooted, hands shoved into his jacket to keep them warm. He didn't mind the cold. He didn't mind the crowd. He minded only distance, any distance, between himself and his boy. Then, like a quiet note sliding under the noise of the festival, something tugged at the edge of Ethan's attention. A child, alone. A small figure stood at the crosspoint where two tunnels of lights converged. The boy's coat was missing. His hair was tousled, sticking to his forehead. His breath shuddered visibly in the frigid air. Ethan straightened. He'd seen that expression before, the wide, startled eyes of a child whose world had just broken open. He crossed the distance quickly but gently, careful not to startle him. "Hey there," he said, kneeling so he wasn't towering over the boy. "You okay?" The child startled anyway, shrinking back as if bracing for impact. Ethan froze his posture, palms open. "It's all right, I'm not gonna hurt you. Are you lost?" The boy's lips trembled. His voice came out in pieces. "Yes." "What's your name?" For a moment, the lights around them seemed to hum louder than the child's whisper. "Oliver." The name almost disappeared into the air, thin, fragile, as if spoken through a crack in the heart. Ethan felt a familiar ache stir in his chest. "Okay, Oliver," he murmured. "Let's find your mom, all right?" Oliver looked around in panic. No one was rushing toward him. No voice was calling his name. No arms outstretched. A gust of wind passed over them. The boy shivered hard. "You're freezing," Ethan said softly. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his jacket, the only warm coat he owned, and draped it around Oliver's tiny shoulders. The jacket nearly swallowed him whole, but Oliver clutched it with both fists as though holding on to the last patch of warmth in the world. The boy moved closer, hesitant at first, then urgently. His small hand closed around Ethan's. Ethan's throat tightened. This was the reflex of a child who had run out of adults to trust. "It's okay," Ethan whispered. "You're safe with me." He guided Oliver through the crowd toward the temporary medical tent near the ice rink. On the way, Ethan flagged a volunteer in a reflective vest and spoke fast, low, practical. Oliver's name, his missing coat, where he'd been found. The volunteer nodded and keyed something into a radio, the kind of small procedure that didn't look like much but mattered when panic spread. Inside the tent, chaos reigned. A teenager cried about her sprained ankle. A man insisted he'd lost his phone to a thief disguised as Santa. 3 children clung to blankets while volunteers tried to soothe them. A young nurse approached Ethan, eyes widening at the shivering child. "He's lost," Ethan explained. "Name's Oliver, no parent nearby." The nurse typed quickly on a tablet, shook her head. "No missing report yet, and we're overwhelmed." She lowered her voice. "Your best bet is to stay somewhere bright and visible. Parents tend to circle the big areas when looking." Ethan glanced at Oliver, who was gripping his jacket with both hands like it was an anchor. "All right," he sighed. "I'll keep him with me." The nurse's shoulders eased. Gratitude, not relief. "Thank you," she said, then turned back into the churn of emergencies. Just then, "Bah! I found you!" Noah bounded into the tent, cheeks flushed, breath smoky in the cold. His eyes lit up when he saw Oliver. "Who's he?" "A friend," Ethan answered. "He's lost. We're helping him till we find his mom." Noah crouched down immediately, rummaged in his pocket, and held out a small gingerbread cookie. "Want some? It's good." Oliver blinked. Then, slowly, he accepted it. A connection, quick, gentle, effortless, sparked between them. Noah grinned. "See? We're friends now." Ethan's heart squeezed. Children didn't care about walls. They cared about warmth. "Come on," he said. "Let's get out of this crowd." They followed a narrow path toward the lakefront. The noise faded. The lights softened. The reflections on the dark water shimmered like spilled stars. Oliver stayed pressed to Ethan's side, half hidden in the oversized jacket. Noah walked ahead, swinging the leftover cookie as if it were a sword. They reached a bench near the water. Ethan sat, and Oliver pressed into him instinctively. The boy rested his head against Ethan's arm, exhaling a trembling breath that sounded like release. Noah plopped down beside them and leaned against Ethan's other shoulder. For a moment, just a moment, it felt like the world held still. 2 children, one on each side, one man in the middle, carrying more weight than he ever admitted. 3 hearts trying to stay warm on a winter night. "Don't worry," Ethan said softly to Oliver. "We'll find your mom. I'm not leaving you." Oliver's eyes fluttered closed, trusting him completely. And somewhere on the opposite end of the festival, at that exact second, a billionaire was breaking apart searching for this child. Vivian Reed ran like a woman fleeing fire. She shoved through crowds, ignoring startled faces. Her security team shouted apologies behind her, but she didn't slow. Her lungs burned, her throat felt scraped raw, her heartbeat slammed so violently it sent tremors down her arms. "Oliver! Baby! Oliver, answer me!" People turned, whispered, pointed. Wasn't that Vivian Reed, the tech magnate, the AI prodigy, the woman worth billions? She didn't look like any of those things now. She looked like a mother who couldn't breathe. She had been holding Oliver's hand. She remembered that clearly. They'd been waiting near the carousel. A call came in from the board. Urgent, they said. Just 1 minute, she'd told her son. 1 minute. When she looked up, Oliver was gone. Vivian had known grief. She had buried her husband 2 years earlier, shattered beyond recognition. But this was terror with teeth. "Ma'am," one guard panted, catching up. "We're sweeping every section." "Not fast enough," Vivian barked, voice cracking. "He's 5. He's out here alone. He hates crowds. Her words dissolved. She couldn't speak the worst thought lighting up inside her like electricity. She would not survive losing another person she loved. "Ma'am!" A voice crackled through the guard's earpiece. Possible match. Small boy, brown hair, blue sweater. Near the lake. With an adult male. Vivian didn't wait. Didn't breathe. Didn't think. She ran. And she arrived just in time to see it. Her son, her little boy, wrapped in the arms of a stranger. Wrapped in a coat he didn't own. Sitting against a man whose face Vivian had never seen. And something feral snapped loose inside her, part fear, part fury, part the brutal instinct of a mother who'd already lost once and refused to lose again. "Stop! That's my son! Don't touch him!" The words detonated in the cold air. Oliver jerked awake in terror. Noah froze. Ethan instinctively shifted, angling his body to shield both children from the sudden rush of adults. Vivian lunged, yanking Oliver up and away. The boy cried out, not from pain, but from the shock of being torn from the only safe place he'd had in the last hour. "Don't you touch him!" Vivian shouted at Ethan. "What were you doing with my son?" Ethan raised both hands, palms open, voice steady, but breath uneven. I was helping him. He was lost." "Liar." Vivian's voice broke. I saw you holding him." Oliver twisted in his mother's arms, sobbing. "Mom, stop! Stop! He saved me! He helped me! I was scared!" Vivian froze, as if the world hit pause. The truth sank in, slowly, sharply, painfully. Oliver clung to Ethan's jacket, reaching out with one small hand, not toward danger, but toward safety, toward the man Vivian had just attacked. Vivian's face drained of color. Her voice crumbled. "Oh, God. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought—" Ethan swallowed, shoulders loosening a fraction. "It's all right," he said quietly. "If Noah were missing, I'd have done a lot worse than shout." Vivian blinked, stunned by the grace she was given when she deserved none. She looked at this stranger, the man who had taken off his only coat to warm Oliver, and something inside her rearranged. This wasn't a threat. This wasn't danger. This was kindness she almost ruined. This was the man who saved her son. For a few stretched, brittle seconds, no one moved. The wind off the lake hissed between them. The festival music felt suddenly out of place, like it belonged to some other night where people's hearts weren't hanging by a thread. Then the moment cracked open. A security guard jogged up, one hand on his earpiece, the other half raised as if trying to hold the chaos at bay. "Ms. Reed, ma'am, is everything all right?" Vivian didn't answer right away. She was staring at Oliver, who was still clutching the stranger's jacket with white-knuckled fingers. The boy's tear-streaked face was pressed against fabric that didn't smell like home, but somehow felt like safety. Ethan lowered his hands slowly, palms no longer in surrender but simply empty. "Yes," Vivian said at last, voice hoarse. "No, I mean, the situation is under control." The guard's shoulders eased. A couple of bystanders lowered their phones. Some looked embarrassed. Others simply drifted away as if the scene had never happened. Only Noah stayed close, eyes wide, tucked partly behind Ethan's leg. Vivian saw the phones, and for the first time since the panic began, a different kind of fear slid under her skin, the kind that had nothing to do with losing her son, and everything to do with what could happen to the man who had saved him. This could look like a kidnapping. It could become a story. It could stain a stranger's life because Vivian had panicked. She swallowed hard. "Everyone," she said, louder now, voice carrying that unmistakable authority she'd used in boardrooms and courtrooms. "There's been a misunderstanding. This man," she nodded toward Ethan, "protected my son. He kept him safe until I could find him. I was wrong." The security guard stepped half a pace forward, scanning the crowd. "We'll make sure no one gives you trouble, sir," he said to Ethan, not as a favor, but as a correction to the night. Vivian turned back to Ethan, chest tight. "I owe you an apology," she said. "A real one. Not just—" She gestured vaguely at the air where her shout still seemed to vibrate. Ethan shrugged one shoulder, as if he'd been through worse. "You were scared. Fear doesn't always sound pretty. I get it." Vivian blinked, caught off guard by how gently he said it. "My name is Vivian," she said, as if rebuilding from the ground up. "Vivian Reed." She waited, out of habit, for recognition to change his posture, his tone, his eyes. Ethan only nodded. "Ethan." "And this is Noah," the boy chimed in before his father could introduce him, peeking out from behind Ethan's leg. "And your son's name is Oliver." "He told us. He likes gingerbread cookies." Oliver sniffled, swiping at his face with the back of his hand. "I got lost." Vivian's chest tightened at the tremor in his voice. "I looked away for 1 minute," she said, more to herself than to anyone else. 1 minute. Ethan's gaze softened with something that looked a lot like understanding. "That's all it takes." "I should have been watching," Vivian muttered. "Yeah," Ethan said quietly, "but you are here now. That counts for something." Vivian wasn't sure she believed that. She'd built a life around the idea that failure in any moment erased all previous effort, but it stayed with her anyway. She forced herself to focus. "Let me do something," she said. "Anything. A hot drink. A place to warm up. Her voice slipped. "I don't want to just walk away after what happened." Ethan looked like he might refuse. Pride lived in the set of his jaw. It wasn't the brittle pride Vivian saw in boardrooms, but something humbler and more stubborn. It was the pride of someone used to standing alone because there was no one else to lean on. Then Noah shivered. The boy tried to hide it, but his shoulders betrayed him. Ethan noticed. Vivian did too. Vivian seized the opening like it was a chance at redemption. "There's a private lounge for donors and sponsors just up the hill," she said. "Warm, quiet, real chairs. I know it sounds fancy," she added, aware of how it might land. "But it's empty half the time and stocked with decent hot chocolate. At least let me get your son something warm." Ethan hesitated. Noah looked up at him hopefully. "Bah," he whispered. "Do they have marshmallows?" Vivian almost smiled. "They can." Ethan exhaled, the sound half reluctant, half resigned. "All right," he said, "but only so the boys can warm up. You don't owe us anything." Vivian nodded once. "I do, actually, but we can argue about that later." The path to the VIP lounge wound up a small hill, lined with lanterns that swayed in the winter breeze. From above, the festival looked like a tapestry of light stitched onto dark earth. Ethan fell into step a little behind Vivian, not out of deference, but because he was still trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the headlines he'd occasionally glanced at in convenience stores. He knew the name. You didn't live in Seattle and not know it. Vivian Reed, The tech visionary, the AI mogul, the woman whose company's servers hummed in windowless buildings that ate power and spat out profit. The woman whose face showed up in articles with words like disruptive and revolutionary and controversial. She didn't look like a headline now. She looked like a mother whose heart was still 2 steps behind her body, catching up. At the top of the hill, 2 security guards flanked a set of frosted glass doors leading into a modern structure with floor-to-ceiling windows. Warm light spilled out onto the frost-dusted ground. The guards straightened when they saw Vivian. "Evening, Ms. Reed," one of them said. His gaze flicked briefly to Ethan and Noah, then to Oliver wrapped in someone else's jacket. Questions rose and died in his eyes. "They're with me," Vivian said simply. "Family guests." The words surprised her as they left her mouth. She wasn't sure why she'd chosen them, maybe because she could feel tension in Ethan beside her, the kind that came from stepping into a world that wasn't built for you. The guard nodded and opened the door. Warmth hit them like a soft wave. Inside, the lounge was all clean lines and soft edges, plush seating in shades of charcoal and cream, a long glass fireplace flickering along one wall, a buffet table laden with food that looked too carefully arranged to be truly touched. Only a handful of people were present. An older couple murmuring over wine, a woman in a designer coat tapping on her phone, a man in a suit absently stirring an untouched drink. All of them looked up when the door opened. Vivian felt the familiar shift in the room, the way attention unconsciously tilted toward her as if she were a gravitational center. Normally, she ignored it. Tonight, she felt newly aware of the man walking slightly behind her, in a sweater worn at the cuffs, with a little boy still staring wide-eyed at the space. She didn't know why she cared that Ethan felt like he belonged here. She just did. "Hot chocolate," Vivian said under her breath, striding toward the bar where a young bartender was polishing glasses. "With marshmallows." "Yes, ma'am," the bartender said. "And one without," Ethan added automatically. "For me, I'm driving." The bartender glanced between them, then nodded. Noah and Oliver were already drawn toward the windows like magnets. From this height, they could see the entire festival spread out around the lake, lights winding through darkness, tiny moving figures like sparks. "Look, Ba!" Noah pressed his hands to the glass. "We can see the maze from here." Ethan walked over, the warmth of the room unfreezing his fingers enough to feel the ache. He stood beside his son and Oliver, watching their reflections overlay the glittering landscape. 2 little boys, side by side. One had a billionaire's last name. One had a father still catching up on rent. From this angle, it was impossible to tell which was which. Vivian joined them a moment later, 2 mugs in each hand. The bartender had been generous with the marshmallows. In Noah's cup, they formed a drifting white island. "Here you go," Vivian said, handing a mug to each boy. "Thank you," Noah said immediately, the way Ethan had drilled into him. Oliver echoed, "Thank you, Mom." And Ethan. The name landed in Vivian's ears like something unexpected but not unwelcome. Her son saying the stranger's name with ease. "You're welcome," she replied, not sure whether she was answering her son or Ethan. They drank in silence for a moment. Outside, the sound of distant laughter mingled with faint music. Inside, the world felt slowed, as if someone had turned down time's volume. Eventually, Vivian cleared her throat. "I'd like to hear what happened," she said, looking at Oliver. "From start to finish." Oliver shifted, suddenly shy. He glanced at Ethan, then at Noah, then back at his mother. We were by the carousel," he began tentatively. "You were on the phone. You said 1 minute. I wanted to see the lights. I thought I could stay close. But then there were so many people. Someone bumped me. And then I couldn't find you." His voice wobbled on the last words. "I called for you, but it was loud. I went down the wrong way, and then everything was too bright and too big. Vivian's chest tightened. I got really scared, Oliver continued. And then I saw him. He nodded toward Ethan. He asked my name. He put his coat on me. It was warm, he added, as if that detail mattered most. It did. He took me to the place with the nurses. They were too busy, so he said he'd stay with me. He didn't go away. We went to the water. Noah gave me a cookie. I wasn't scared anymore. Noah swallowed his mouthful of marshmallow-heavy chocolate. He was shaking, he said solemnly, like a lot. Ba says when people are scared, you stay with them until they stop feeling alone. So we did. Both boys looked at Ethan then, as if waiting for him to confirm the story. He lifted one shoulder. That's about it. Vivian stared at her son, at the stranger, at her own trembling hands around the mug. I should have been the one to do that, she said quietly. To keep you warm. To calm you down. Mom, Oliver interrupted softly. You came. The simple fact slipped into the space between them like a balm. You came for me, Oliver repeated, almost like he was reassuring his mother of something she'd forgotten. You always come for me. Vivian's throat burned. I will, she whispered. Every time. I promise. She turned back to Ethan. I owe you more than a drink. Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but Vivian held up a hand. Please, let me say this. She took a breath. Thank you, she said, for seeing my son when no one else did. For giving him your coat. For not dropping him off with the first official-looking person and walking away. You stayed. You made him feel safe until I could get there. She swallowed. I don't know if I've ever been that kind to a stranger in my life. It wasn't complicated, Ethan replied. He was scared. I was there. That's enough. Vivian almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so far from how her world worked. In my world, she said slowly, nothing is ever that simple. Maybe that's the problem, Ethan said before he could stop himself. Vivian blinked. There was no malice in the comment, just a quiet observation, like noting the weather or the temperature of the room. She found, to her surprise, that she wasn't offended. Maybe you're right, she admitted. She reached into her coat pocket, fingers brushing the smooth edge of her phone. It was instinct, how she'd solved most problems for the last decade, with resources, with leverage, with money. Let me do something, she said. A check, a transfer, Ethan's expression shifted and Vivian stopped. The look on his face wasn't greed or excitement. It was something closer to hurt. Ms. Reed, Ethan said quietly. I didn't keep your son alive for a payout. Vivian flushed. I know, of course I know, This is how She exhaled. This is how I'm used to thanking people. Then maybe, Ethan replied. Say thank you and let it be enough. Noah watched the exchange with a furrowed brow, as if trying to decipher a grown-up puzzle. Oliver leaned against Ethan's side again, not quite ready to let go of the borrowed safety, even with his mother only inches away. Vivian stared at the man her son was leaning on. In her world, every kindness came with an invoice. Every favor was a negotiation. Every alliance had a contract. Here was something else entirely. What do you do, Ethan? She asked, more softly now. For work, I mean. Ethan hesitated, as if the question felt less important than the moment they were in, but he answered anyway. I drive, he said. Deliveries. Before that, I was a firefighter. Vivian's eyebrows rose. You left. Didn't have much choice, Ethan replied. Long story. Short version. Single dad, unpredictable shifts, no nearby family. There are some fires you can't walk into if you've got a 6-year-old waiting to see if you're coming home. Noah's small hand found Ethan's, squeezing gently. Vivian looked from father to son. She thought about the dozen times her assistant had offered to hire another full-time nanny so she could work even longer hours. She thought about all the times she'd chosen a boardroom over bedtime because it was easier to be excellent at business than to be present in grief. She pictured Ethan, standing in a doorway somewhere, saying no to a career built on courage because there was a little boy counting the minutes until his father walked back through the door. In my world, Vivian said slowly, people build whole empires so they can avoid saying no to themselves. Ethan almost smiled. In mine, you say no a lot, so something small can stay alive. Their eyes met for a brief, unguarded moment. Then Oliver tugged on Vivian's sleeve. Mom, he whispered, can we stay with them for a little? I like Noah and Ethan. I wasn't scared with them. Vivian looked down at her son, at the pleading in his eyes, the kind of quiet, vulnerable request Oliver didn't make often. We've already taken up too much of their time, she began automatically. Oh, it's fine, Noah cut in. We weren't doing anything. We just came to see the lights, 'cause Ba said Christmas still has to be magic even if we don't have much money this year. Noah, Ethan warned softly. But the words were already out, hanging between the polished walls and curated decor like something that didn't belong and yet refused to apologize for existing. Vivian's gaze sharpened. She thought of the ticket price to the festival, of the cost of the lounge, of the coat she was wearing, which probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. She thought of her son wrapped in another man's jacket, a jacket that had been given without a second thought. You came here, Vivian said, gentler now, even though money is tight? Ethan didn't flinch. Yeah, because Noah needed a night that didn't feel like losing. Vivian's chest tightened at that. She turned it into action before her voice could betray her. There's a charity event in the main pavilion in about an hour, she said. Nothing too formal, just food, music, people pretending they don't care about being rich while they talk about being rich. Ethan gave her a look that said he didn't entirely believe the nothing too formal part. I'm supposed to make an appearance, Vivian continued. Smile, wave, talk about our foundation's work. I was going to go with Oliver and then leave him with a sitter in the VIP section. She paused. I don't want to do that anymore. What do you want to do instead? Ethan asked. Vivian glanced at the boys again, at how close they stood, at the way Oliver's shoulders were finally relaxed. I want my son to have one night, she said slowly, where his world feels bigger, not lonelier, where he has a friend who likes him because he shared a cookie, not because of his last name. And I'd like to spend that night with the man who got him through his worst hour. She breathed in, steadying herself. Come to the event as my guests, she said. You and Noah. Nothing expected, nothing owed. Just stay. Ethan looked toward the window, where his son was now pressing his nose to the glass, laughing at something Oliver had said. He thought of the cheap meal he'd planned to grab on the way home, of the beat-up couch waiting for them in their small apartment, of the way Noah had looked at the lights as if they were a doorway into another universe. Maybe, just for one night, the boy could step through it. Okay, Ethan said quietly. We'll stay. For a little while. Vivian's shoulders dropped in a way that had nothing to do with stress and everything to do with relief. Thank you, she murmured. Ethan shook his head. Tonight, I think that's my line. From the window, the boys watched the festival shift and shimmer. They didn't know that the night had just changed shape. They didn't know that two adults behind them, one in a borrowed sweater, one in a tailored coat, had made a choice that would tangle their lives together for far longer than a single winter evening. All they knew was this: the lights were beautiful, the cocoa was warm, and for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone in a crowd. The walk toward the grand pavilion felt like moving from one world into another, one stitched from quiet gratitude and unexpected connection into one built on spectacle, wealth, and the curated illusion of benevolence. It wasn't lost on Ethan. He could feel the shift before they even reached the main stairs. Expensive perfume threading through cold air, a different cadence of laughter, the soft click of high-end shoes against stone. The banners above the pavilion shimmered with gold text: Reed Foundation, Winter Gala, impacting tomorrow. Vivian winced slightly at the slogan as they passed under it. "I didn't write that," she said under her breath. "I figured," Ethan murmured. Board insisted. They liked the word impact. Impact feels like getting hit by something. Vivian let out a short laugh. "Trust me, that's exactly how board meetings feel." As they stepped inside, the temperature rose instantly, as if wealth itself heated the air. Crystal chandeliers floated above, catching light in dozens of fractured colors. Musicians played near a tall Christmas tree, decorated with glass ornaments that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. Everywhere, elites drifted, donors in tailored suits, spouses in shimmering dresses, staff carrying trays of champagne. Conversations buzzed with ease, punctuated by polite laughter and clinks of crystal. Noah moved closer to Ethan's side, overwhelmed. Oliver did the same with Vivian. For a moment, just a sliver, they looked like mirrored pairs, one wealthy mother, one struggling father. Two boys searching for something familiar in a world that belonged to neither. Vivian leaned slightly toward Ethan. "If it feels uncomfortable, we can leave any time." "It's fine," Ethan said, though his chest was tight. "This isn't for me. It's for them." Noah and Oliver glanced up at the towering tree, then at each other, and something warm flickered between them. A staff member approached with an iPad, posture crisp. "Ms. Reed, so glad you're here. We're scheduled for your welcome speech in 10 minutes. Shall I arrange seating for your guests?" The staffer's eyes flickered briefly to Ethan's frayed sweater and Noah's patched coat. It wasn't judgment exactly, but it was awareness. Vivian didn't miss it. "These are personal guests," she said evenly. "Please treat them like family." Family. The word wasn't planned. Ethan heard it, and something rigid inside him softened just a fraction. "Of course, ma'am," the staffer said quickly, recalibrating. Vivian turned to Ethan. "Let me get us a space where the boys can breathe. You two settle in." Ethan nodded and watched her disappear into the cluster of organizers, instantly surrounded. The pavilion had a mezzanine balcony overlooking the main hall. Ethan led the boys toward a quieter corner where a second-floor railing gave them a perfect view of everything below. Light spilled up to meet them, warm and soft, like the glow of a fireplace magnified tenfold. "Bah," Noah whispered, looking down at the glittering room. "It's like a castle." Ethan smiled. "A weird one. Do they have queens?" "No." He hesitated, then nodded toward the floor below. "But they have people who think they are." Noah nodded as if this made perfect sense. Below them, guests mingled with practiced ease. Their conversations floated up in snippets. "Acquisition closes next quarter. Write-off will reduce tax exposure. Vivian looks exhausted, doesn't she? Her little boy is adorable. Who's the guy with her? Doesn't look like her usual circle." Ethan's jaw tightened. He wasn't supposed to be here. His sweater was worn because buying a new one meant Noah wouldn't have winter boots. His shoes were scuffed from years of double shifts. His hair needed a trim, but rent had been due last week. This hall wasn't built for people like him. But then, "Bah," Noah whispered, tugging gently at his sleeve. Ethan looked down. His son's eyes were wide, not with shame, but awe. Not insecurity, wonder. "Do you think Oliver likes me?" Noah asked suddenly. Ethan blinked. "I think Oliver needed you. That matters more." Noah considered this. "Sometimes I wish—" He stopped. "What?" Ethan asked softly. "I wish I could be part of someone else's world for a night," Noah said. "Just to see what it feels like." It broke something in Ethan, something he didn't know had a fracture line until it split. He knelt, pulling Noah into a gentle hug. "You are the best part of my world," he murmured. "And if anyone can make a world feel better just by being in it, it's you." Noah hugged him back fiercely. Behind them, a small voice said, "Me too." Oliver stood clutching Ethan's jacket to his chest. Ethan opened an arm. Oliver stepped into it without hesitation. Something warm and fragile settled inside Ethan's ribcage. Two boys, one on each side, leaning into him the same way living things lean toward warmth. He didn't know that Vivian had returned and was watching from 10 steps away. Vivian's breath caught. She had seen people earn fortunes. She had seen people lose them. She had seen things rise, fall, break, rebuild. But she had rarely seen gentleness like this. Her son, who was usually careful around strangers, rested his head against Ethan's shoulder as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And Noah, small, brave Noah, hugging Ethan with the kind of certainty that came from knowing his father would always choose him. Vivian found herself rooted to the spot. She swallowed. They didn't see her blink hard. "You okay, Ms. Reed?" Ethan asked when she stepped closer. Vivian nodded once, the movement tight. "Yeah, just checking in." She turned to the boys. "You two doing all right?" They nodded vigorously. "Good," Vivian said, "because I have a question." Both boys leaned forward. "How do you feel about dancing?" Noah froze. Oliver blinked. "Dancing?" they echoed. Vivian nodded toward the ballroom floor, where children from other donor families spun around in fancy outfits. Some adults joined, others simply watched. Ethan raised a brow. "You dance?" "No," Vivian admitted, "but Oliver does." She glanced at her son. "Would you like to try? With Noah?" Oliver hesitated, then looked at Noah. "Only if you do it with me." The boys clasped hands. "Okay," they said together. Vivian looked at Ethan, a faint smile tugging her mouth. "Well, looks like we're dancing too." Ethan gave her a look that was half amusement, half dread. "Just follow the kids," Vivian deadpanned. "No one expects us to be good." The four of them approached the dance floor. The music softened, a slow, whimsical orchestral piece that felt like snow falling in warm light. Children spun in circles, giggling. A few adults swayed awkwardly. Noah and Oliver started with small steps, shuffling, turning, trying, failing, laughing. Oliver tugged Noah's arm and nearly toppled. Noah caught him, and they both squealed. Vivian watched with a softness she tried to hide. "How long has it been since Oliver laughed like that?" Ethan asked quietly. Vivian swallowed. "Too long." "And you?" Vivian didn't answer. She didn't need to. After a moment, she exhaled. "A year, maybe more. After his dad died, he sort of folded inward. I tried everything. Classes, sitters, toys, trips. But grief doesn't respond to money. No, Ethan said softly. It doesn't. Vivian looked at him. What did you do? After you lost your wife? Ethan's eyes drifted to Noah, spinning under the chandelier. I held on to the one thing I had left, he said. My son. Even when it hurt. Vivian nodded slowly. I forgot how to do that. No, Ethan corrected. You remembered tonight. Vivian blinked, taken aback. She would replay that sentence in her mind for months. Near the cookie table, the boys were building something, stacking cookies into bizarre architectural shapes, laughing as they fell. Oliver looked up. Mom, can Noah come over sometime? To our house? Vivian blinked. Ethan stiffened. The question hovered, innocent, hopeful, impossible. We'll see, Vivian murmured, buying time. Oliver frowned. That means no. No, Vivian said quickly. It means I wasn't expecting the question. Oliver opened his mouth again. Before he could speak, the speaker system buzzed. A woman's voice. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our host for tonight's winter gala. The spotlight snapped onto the stage. Ms. Vivian Reed. Vivian inhaled sharply. Ethan nudged her. Go, you've got this. Vivian stared at him, confused. You don't even know what I'm supposed to say. You'll say the truth, Ethan replied. People can feel that. Vivian swallowed, nodded once, and walked toward the stage. As their eyes followed her, Noah whispered up at Ethan, Bah, is Vivian a good person? Ethan thought about the panic, the shouting, the apology, the warmth in the lounge, the dance floor, the honesty in Vivian's voice. Yes, he said quietly. I think she's trying very hard to be. Vivian stepped up to the podium. The lights dimmed. The crowd fell silent. She had spoken in front of thousands before. Investors, governments, universities. But never like this. Never with her son watching from a cookie-covered table. Never with a stranger she admired leaning against the back wall, arms crossed, eyes steady. She cleared her throat. Good evening, she began. Thank you all for supporting the Reed Foundation. Tonight was supposed to be about charity, numbers, and impact. A ripple of polite laughter moved through the crowd. But something happened tonight that changed what I want to talk about. Ethan straightened. Vivian glanced briefly toward Oliver. My son got lost. The room murmured. A few people stiffened. Vivian lifted a hand. He's safe now. But for half an hour, I was living the worst fear any parent can imagine. Ethan's breath caught. What matters is not that he was lost, Vivian continued, voice growing steadier. What matters is who found him. She searched until she found Ethan's face. A stranger, she said, saw my son crying, cold, terrified, and he didn't walk away. The spotlight flickered, briefly catching Ethan before he could fully shrink from it. In a world where people hurry past each other, Vivian said, this man stopped. He gave my son warmth. He stayed with him when everyone else was too busy. He didn't ask for money. He didn't know my name. He just helped. Silence held the room. And then Vivian said something she had never planned. Something not written on any cue card. It reminded me of the parent I want to be, and the person I want to be. Ethan's throat tightened. Vivian stepped back, exhaled shakily, and finished with, charity doesn't start with wealth. It starts with presence, with noticing the cold, with caring when you don't have to Tonight I was saved by someone who had none of the advantages I do, and all of the courage I've been too afraid to practice." The room erupted into applause. Not polite, but real. Ethan looked away, overwhelmed. Noah tugged his sleeve. "But she's talking about you." "I know," Ethan whispered. Voice unsteady. "I know." Vivian left the stage and started back toward them. And that was when the night tried to bite again. A man in a tuxedo, red-faced from champagne and certainty, stepped into Vivian's path with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. One of the donor board members Ethan had seen on posters, important enough to stand close to the microphones, arrogant enough to believe the world was a room he owned. "Vivian," he said, too loud, as if the applause had given him permission. "Beautiful speech. Truly. But you can't just bring—" His gaze slid toward the mezzanine, toward Ethan's worn sweater, toward Noah's patched coat. "Random people into a donor event. Optics matter. Security protocols matter. This is a foundation, not a—" He made a small, dismissive motion. "Rescue shelter." The words weren't shouted, but they carried, because rooms like this were built to carry the voices of people who thought they deserved to be heard. Ethan went still. Noah instinctively pressed closer to him. Vivian stopped walking. For a heartbeat, she looked like the woman from the lake, raw, frightened, too human. Then she became something else. Not the headline, not the brand, not the billionaire. Something harder and cleaner. A mother who had learned in one night what her power was actually for. She turned back to the man, and her voice lowered. Not softer, just sharper. "His name is Ethan Miller," she said. "He's not random. He's the reason my son is sleeping safely in that building instead of still crying somewhere in a crowd." The man's smile faltered. Vivian continued, each word placed like a lock clicking shut. "And since you mentioned protocols, my security team can confirm he reported Oliver to festival staff, brought him to medical, and stayed visible near the lake. He did exactly what we tell people to do. He did it while giving my child his only coat." A ripple moved through the nearest guests. Small shifts, embarrassed blinks, the sound of someone realizing they'd misjudged the wrong person in front of the right crowd. The board member tried to recover. "Vivian, I'm only saying—" "You're only saying what you're used to saying in rooms like this," Vivian cut in. "But tonight, I'm not interested in your comfort." The room around them went quiet in that particular way, where nobody wants to be caught on the wrong side of a truth. Vivian's eyes didn't leave his. "If you want to talk about optics," she said, "here's one. A foundation that applauds kindness on stage but shames it in the hallway is not a foundation worth funding." The man swallowed. His cheeks darkened. Vivian took one step closer. Not threatening, just final. "And here's another protocol," she added, calm as ice. "My guests are my responsibility. If anyone has a problem with Ethan Miller or his son, they can bring it to me, not to them." She turned then, ending the conversation the way she ended meetings, and walked toward the mezzanine. Behind her, the donor board member stood frozen in the aftermath of his own words, suddenly aware of how small he sounded. Ethan watched her approach, stunned. Vivian stopped in front of him. The chandeliers made halos out of everything, but her eyes were steady, bare. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Again. For the lake. For the way people looked at you just now. For the fact that you had to feel, even for a second, like you didn't belong in a room you earned." Ethan's jaw flexed. "I'm used to it." "I don't want you to be," Vivian said. Noah looked up at her, cautious and curious, as if trying to decide if adults could really change in one night. Vivian's gaze softened at the boy. You did nothing wrong, she told Noah. You hear me? Nothing. Noah nodded once, serious. Oliver's small voice drifted from the cookie table, sleepy now, muffled by cocoa and warmth. Mom. Vivian turned. Yeah, baby? Oliver held out Ethan's jacket, still wrapped around his chest like a shield. It smells safe, he mumbled, like it was the most important fact in the world. The room seemed to tilt on that sentence. Ethan's throat tightened. Vivian walked to Oliver and knelt, smoothing his hair back. I know, she whispered. Then she looked up at Ethan, and something honest passed between them, an understanding that wasn't about money or status or the gala at all. It's yours, Ethan began, nodding at the jacket as if to say he didn't want a child to lose what kept him steady. Vivian shook her head gently. He can keep it for tonight, she said. Not as a souvenir. As a bridge. Ethan didn't speak. Vivian rose. But you can't go home without a coat, she added, practical now, almost stern, like she was refusing to let kindness become self-punishment. Ethan opened his mouth. Vivian lifted a hand, one clean, quiet stop, nothing like the shout by the lake. Not a payout, she said, reading his face. Not a debt. Just a fact. It's cold outside, and you have a child who needs you alive. She turned to a security guard nearby, one who had watched the hallway scene with tight discomfort and was now grateful for a clear instruction. Please, Vivian said, have someone bring a warm coat, something simple, no logos, no headlines, just a coat. The guard nodded quickly and disappeared. Ethan's shoulders tensed, then eased in a reluctant surrender, not to money, but to the reality that refusing help could be its own kind of pride. Noah leaned into him, whispering, Bah, it's okay. Ethan swallowed. All right, he said, voice rough. All right. Minutes later, the guard returned with a plain, dark coat. Clean, heavy, warm. Not flashy. Just something that would do its job. Vivian held it out, not like a CEO presenting a gift, but like one parent handing another parent a blanket. Ethan stared at it, then at her. This isn't, he began. I know what it isn't, Vivian said softly. And I know what it is. He took it. Not as a transaction. As a truth. Noah watched, wide-eyed, as if witnessing the world rewrite one line. Vivian's voice lowered. And for the record, she added, if anyone tries to turn tonight into a story that hurts you, my foundation, my security, and my name will correct it. Loudly. Ethan nodded once. Thank you. Vivian's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Say it like you mean it. Ethan exhaled, half laugh, half ache. Thank you. I mean it. The fireworks began not long after, just as the boys finished their last cups of cocoa, brilliant red streaks bursting above Lake Union, mirrored in the cold, black water like lanterns drifting into the sky. People pressed closer to the pavilion windows to watch. Music softened. The energy shifted into something hushed and reverent. Ethan stood slightly apart from the crowd, Noah leaning sleepily into his side. Vivian walked toward them slowly, Oliver in her arms, the boy's head resting on her shoulder as if the night had finally tired him out. For a long moment, neither spoke. They simply watched their sons, who had met as strangers hours earlier, resting in almost identical ways. Trusting, soft, safe. Two little boys who once belonged to two opposite worlds, now connected by something as simple and powerful as kindness. Vivian exhaled gently. I've spent years, she said quietly, trying to build something that mattered. And tonight I realized I was measuring that wrong. Ethan glanced at her. Meaning? Meaning I've built companies, Vivian continued. But I haven't built a life. Not a real one. Not one my son can feel. She looked out at the fireworks, gold pouring like molten stars. And you showed me what that looks like. Without meaning to. Or trying. Ethan shook his head. I didn't show you anything. I just stayed with Oliver. That's exactly it, Vivian said softly. You stayed. She turned fully to Ethan then. No public armor, no polished distance. Just a woman who loved her child and had been afraid to admit how much she needed someone to see that. I want our sons to keep seeing each other, Vivian said. No obligations, no guilt, just friendship. For them. Maybe even something like friendship for us. Ethan studied her for a long moment. What if we're too different? He asked. Vivian gave a tired, crooked smile. We are. But maybe difference isn't a barrier. Maybe it's a bridge. Ethan looked down at Noah's sleeping face. He thought of Oliver shivering in the cold. He thought of a borrowed jacket wrapped around a frightened boy, and something in him softened. All right, he said quietly. Let's see where this goes. Vivian didn't hide her relief. Thank you, she murmured. But Ethan touched her arm lightly and shook his head. No, he said. Tonight, your son already thanked me. That's enough. Oliver stirred, blinking sleepily at Vivian. Mom, are Ethan and Noah coming for Christmas? Vivian looked at Ethan, letting him answer the question neither of them had spoken aloud. Ethan smiled. If you'll have us. Oliver beamed. Yes, Noah mumbled in his sleep. But, can we see them again? Ethan brushed a hand over his son's hair. We will. Vivian extended her hand, not as a CEO, not as a woman repaying a debt, but simply as a mother offering a beginning. This time, Ethan took it. And before they moved, before the night could scatter them back into separate worlds, Oliver's fingers tightened around the old jacket in Vivian's arms. He didn't let it go. Not because it was expensive, not because it was new, because it had been given without being asked. Vivian looked down at it, then back at Ethan and nodded once, as if making a private vow. Keep it tonight, she whispered to Oliver. And tomorrow, we'll return it. Her eyes met Ethan's. Not because we're done, she said softly. Because we're not. The final firework blossomed above them, white and silver, illuminating the four of them in a quiet halo of light. 4 silhouettes, too tall, too small, standing close enough to cast just one shadow. A new kind of family forming not by blood or circumstance, but by choice, by kindness. By the moment, a single father stayed with a lost child in the cold and changed 3 lives forever. When the lights dimmed and the sky went dark again, Vivian whispered, Let's go home. Ethan whispered back, Maybe we both found one tonight. And for the first time in years, both of them believed it was true.